Moving on to topic number 3, you mentioned, Brandon, the Ravens, who have had just a rough few weeks with the players that they've lost for the season, including J.K. Dobbins, and then Gus Edwards, the second string running back, who would have been, the lead guy. And then the same practice, they have Marcus Peters tear his ACL and be lost the season. So those are 3 very important players they lose for the season. And then on Monday Night Football, they lose a heartbreaker in overtime to the Raiders at Vegas. Brennan, what did you think about this crazy game?
Well, for the Ravens, I know they talk about the injury bug, but man, I've got to tell you, in all the history that I've seen of the NFL, I've never seen the injury bug hit this hard, this early, especially to one position group of one team. I mean, they basically had their whole running back group decimated from injury within like a week or two. And this isn't like stretched out over 6 weeks where, you got one guy that can play. No, they lost a couple running backs within a week. And then on top of that, in the same day, the guy that they thought was going to replace their top running back, J.K. Dobbins, right? He blows out his ACL. That's Gus Edwards in practice. The worst time you want to basically get an injury like that is in a non-competitive situation. And then on top of that same practice, their number 1 cornerback, Marcus Peters, goes down with basically the same injury, another season-ending ACL injury. So talk about just, bad luck going around that locker room. If I'm Harbaugh, I'm saying, get some sage up in here. Let's burn some sage. Like, let's do some sort of lucky dance. Like, let's not have practice for a day and do something to get rid of this bad juju that's going around our facility right now. And the injury bug and just kind of kill that thing right now, because it is really hurting this team. And I think inevitably it did hurt them in week 1 here against the Raiders. I will say Latavius Murray looked pretty good for coming in and basically only being signed basically hours before the game started, and coming in and running pretty well off just, minimal carries. But on top of that, to basically shore up that position, they've signed up a pretty impressive practice squad. And it is historical, we'll say, because it's Devontae Freeman and Le'Veon Bell. But I still think those guys, especially Le'Veon Bell, has a lot left in his tank and can play NFL football. Devontae Freeman, I do think that's questionable how much he does have left in the tank. But I think inevitably Le'Veon Bell is going to find his way onto the active roster here for the Baltimore Ravens and get some downs played. But I think Latavius Murray is going to be their, star back going forward here. And he's just coming off a historically best season last year for the Saints. And the Saints didn't want to pay him some money, so he became a free agent. And I think this was luck for the Baltimore Ravens, considering what just happened to their running back group, to have a guy coming off, a career best year available as a free agent so they could scoop him up. So I do think that's inevitably a little silver lining in the cloud for the Baltimore Ravens. But, man, this injury bug is hitting them hard, and it is going to be something that they're going to have to deal with now throughout the whole season with that injury bug, with just their running backs, but obviously now with Marcus Peters, their number 1 cornerback as well. So it's just really one of those things. They played the Raiders tough, and they had a chance to win. But I don't know. It's just really one of those things. I do think that inevitably that bad juju that was going around and just, all the injuries that they were having to face and all that uphill that they were having to battle definitely at least hurt them here in week 1. So this is another team that I'm looking to see them bounce back in week 2. But it's crazy because they have to play Kansas City week 2. So I think they're up for a big test in week 2, but we will see how they're ready to face that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the Ravens and going up against the Raiders, and you think, the Ravens have more talent. They've had a better pedigree for success over the last decade and even longer. And then you look at how many guys they've lost, and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters. They have, I believe, Jimmy Smith, their second corner, also did not play. I think he had a sprained ankle in training camp and didn't play on Sunday. Even though he's sort of back, he kind of wasn't ready to go. So you got Marlon Humphrey, who's one of the best corners in the league. But then after that, your next 2 corners are down. And then you go up against a Raiders team who they were having Humphrey play a lot on Darren Waller in the second half. Waller still had 10 catches for 130-something yards.
Yep.
He had a huge game. But, you have this Raiders team who probably should have scored in their first possession of overtime. And then they had that crazy interception in the end zone. Ravens fumble it on the next possession. Raiders get it back. First play, wide open receiver, streaking down the seam for a touchdown. And it's just like, you wonder if Marcus Peters was there, would the coverage have been, more in sync in the secondary, because you have your second and third corners out, and then your fourth and fifth corners are now promoted to your second and third corners. And then when you have your top two running backs out, then your third and fourth running backs are in there. Latavius Murray, like you mentioned, pretty reliable, but now you have a bunch of these pieces that were just thrown together because of all these injuries. And that's hard to do, especially in week one when you haven't played a game in the season yet. So I just think with all this, and it's not necessarily that you're losing a certain amount of running backs. It's that when one of your top players goes out of a position, or your second player goes out of a position, the third stringer, is pretty good as a third stringer, but then they come up to a second stringer and they're not always that good. So you have somebody playing at a higher level than they are capable of. That's when those kind of mistakes happen. And I think that's what happened with the Raiders on Monday night. Crazy game. One very entertaining Monday Night Football game. But I think the Ravens kind of blew that one too. And then again, if you don't have that running game, that's a lot on Lamar Jackson, because he's obviously going to run the ball along with being the team's quarterback and throwing the ball downfield. And it looked like they tried to get Marquise Brown a little bit more involved, which I like to see. He's a guy that can really create some explosive plays for them. But without those running backs, they're going to lean heavily on Lamar Jackson. But again, it's good that Le'Veon Bell and Mike Freeman and Latavius Murray are your stable of running backs, because you got three pretty good players there.
Yeah, you still got some good players to go to, luckily. And like I said, I think that might be maybe their saving grace. Especially once Murray does learn the playbook a little bit more and gets a little bit more in tune with Lamar Jackson. I think that'll help them out a lot. But this goes to show, even at any level, and I've said this on many of subjects, whether it be Pop Warner or high school or college or the NFL, that depth is also key. You got to have depth, and it plays out, especially in a game that's so violent and injuries happen. But I think Lamar Jackson looked amazing that night, and he played pretty good, especially for week one. I'm really looking to see what he can do in the matchup against Patrick Mahomes in week two. And just quickly, a guy that we've talked about previously on the show, even did a whole segment on him, Carl Nassib. He was the guy who made that fumble hit and forced the fumble there in overtime on Lamar Jackson and made the play to basically, set up his team to get the win. So big shout out to Carl for making that fumble hit on Lamar. But like I said, Lamar's face at the end of that game told me a lot, that he was really shocked that they just lost this game, and that he's going to come out and do some big things over the next few weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. But also, I think we've got to talk about it maybe at the end with a quick, bonus subject at the end. And that's the Manning Monday night cast from Monday Night Football. I enjoyed watching that. It was absolutely amazing. I did not watch the regular game cast. I watched 100% of the Manning cast for Monday Night Football, and I thought that was amazing. But we'll talk about that at the end, hopefully, because we're a little bonus subject.
Folks, if you like this show, you're watching it right now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. That's Comeback Sports on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, Comeback Sports. And then all the cut-ups that our awesome producer, Ben Kudo, puts together after the show, that'll all filter to your YouTube channel. You don't have to go search for it. It's just right there in your subscriptions.